And some of those behaviors can be scary. They can be aggression, self-injury as behavior, elopement. So they can be scary, they can be dangerous. What they don't want or need, it's coming out as behavior. Clinicians, they hear the word attorney or judge and they're like running for the hills.
Welcome back for another episode of Civility Wins, the Family Law Edition. I am your host, Kristen Goss, and we help spouses divorce with the civility, creating a legacy for themselves and those they love most. I am the founder of KWG, Family Legal and Mediation Services, and I have here today special guest Jamie Bassos. Hi, Jamie. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here.
Good to have you. Excited to get the conversation going. We have great content today. And before we get into it, I'm going to briefly describe Jamie. We're going to talk a little bit about what she does, and then we'll get to it, okay? So Jamie Bassos, she has a Master of Science, and she brings over 25 years of experience specializing in autism, special education, and behavioral health. She is a board-certified behavior analyst, licensed behavior analyst, and ICF-certified executive coach. Her mission is simple: to bring clarity, objectivity, and expertise to cases where questions of parenting, child development, and behavioral needs are critical. And I have her on today because, as most of you know, I am a divorce attorney, and oftentimes special needs children is an issue that we have to address when it comes to timesharing, child support, and other issues. And so I have expert Jamie Bassos here today that's going to share a little bit more about that. If someone out there may be contemplating a divorce, you have a lot of questions, you have a child or children with special needs. And so before we get into that, Jamie, if you can just share with the audience how it is that you ended up doing what you do. Tell us your journey, your why. Everyone has a why. And so share with the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So thank you again for that kind introduction. So when people hear the word board certified behavior analyst, it sounds like a bunch of clinical jargon. So I do like to simplify that a little bit. It's a fancy way of saying I specialize in bringing a deeper understanding of behavior. So what is behavior? What is it trying to communicate? And then how to best respond to behaviors when they happen? What's the best way to manage them and respond? So I have been in the field, like Kristen said, for a little over 25 years, specializing in autism and neurodivergent population. And throughout the course of my career, over the last 15, I've built and scaled 2 applied behavior analysis companies nationwide, serving families who have children on the autism spectrum and also with different developmental needs and behavioral disorders. And I'm currently serving as the COO of one of those behavioral health companies, BrightBridge ABA, serving families in North Carolina, South Carolina, and New Mexico. And through the course of my career, I would say over the last 15 years, have been pulled in to different legal situations where autism was showing up. And attorneys and families were having a really hard time explaining to the court why they were asking for something different. What is it about my case, my child, that is going to be a little bit different than your standard, typical parenting plan, time-sharing situation? And it typically is because this is a neurodivergent individual who needs something a little bit different. And the courts just weren't understanding those pieces. So they brought me in as an expert witness, as a consultant, to help really understand what was happening behaviorally and educationally for this individual child, and then how they were going to craft that parenting plan for their child that was going to help them be successful in the future. So I was finding that I was getting pulled into all these cases, and I was like, this is something that is so needed in our field. Like, we are not doing this. Clinicians, they hear the word attorney or judge and they're like running for the hills. They're like, that's too scary. I don't want to go to court. I don't want to testify. And I'm like, put me in, coach. Like, I'm ready. I'm here. Like, I know that we can help support this family better than having no support at all for this child. So I have found it super rewarding being able to support families and attorneys in this way that's a little bit different than your typical clinician. And I've seen the success that happens when we are brought in early on to help support these cases. And so I started Bassos Consulting Group a little over a year ago and have really just been trying to support more families and legal teams, especially down here in South Florida, where this is my backyard, in those cases.
I love it. I love it. And coming from the legal perspective, right, and going to court, the challenge for sure is exactly what you said. Because for those of you out here, and I'm not giving legal advice, even though I'm an attorney, timesharing is 50-50. That is the presumption in Florida. And oftentimes, and I can speak from personal experience having a special needs child, and I know you and I communicated about that, and she's amazing, and she's a fighter, and she's doing amazing because of the support that is out there. But oftentimes what I'm finding from the legal perspective and trying to advocate for my clients is that 50-50 may not be something that is best suited for the child who has special needs for various number of reasons. They're already going through the trauma and the transition of a breakup, right? And what does that look like for someone who doesn't have special needs? It's hard in and of itself. And then tack on special needs and the support that they need and that they deserve. It really takes a skilled professional such as yourself to come in and really set the family up for success, because it is going to look different. But also when children are involved, and then when you have a special needs child, it's important to ensure that they are set up for success. So my next question to you would be, what would that look like? Give an example of someone like me who's a divorce attorney. I'm helping to advocate for a family legally going through the divorce, and they have a child or children with special needs when it comes to the parenting plan. What would that look like working with you?
Yeah, and I love this question because it really starts, starting from the beginning, like before the divorce is finalized, while you're in the process of figuring out what's going to be best in terms of the parenting plan or the time sharing and the custody agreements. You want to make sure all of these details are outlined beforehand so that you're not having to go back and forth and to court and then, revising the parenting plan down the road. So setting yourself up for success in the beginning is going to be key. And doing that with a child who's neurodivergent, the first thing you want to look at is, what assessments do we have? Like what is this child's profile, full profile, academically, behaviorally, what's the therapy schedule? So really having a clear picture of what that looks like. And then if you don't have, it's called a functional behavioral assessment, an FBA. If you don't have one of those, you want to make sure you get one. Because what that's going to do is really outline for that individual child, why are these challenges even coming up? So what are these behaviors that are interfering with their life? How are they impacting them both academically, social, emotionally? What does the communication piece look like there? And you're able to really get to the bottom of why these behaviors are happening, and have a clear picture of what are they trying to communicate. Because not all children who are neurodivergent are vocal speakers. So they're not always telling you with their words what they need or want or what they don't want or need. It's coming out as behavior. And some of those behaviors can be scary, right? They can be aggression, self-injury is behavior, elopement. So they can be scary, they can be dangerous. And we want to understand why those are happening. So we do that through the FBA process. And then from that, you're going to have a behavior intervention plan. And that, for short, BIP. And that behavior intervention plan is going to get talked about in the parenting plan. So that behavior intervention plan is going to really outline, here's how we are going to support this child across multiple environments, both homes, school, community, and here's how all the adults are going to get on the same page with supporting this child. And then that language goes into the parenting plan. Here's how the parents are going to support this child using this BIP, this behavior intervention plan. Here's how we're going to be responding to behaviors. Here's what communication is going to look like between homes. So really outlining exactly what those contingencies are for that child and that plan for that family is going to be super important. And having it all spelled out up front. Therapy schedules, communication, school placement, and then agreeing on all those things, right? Because that's the hardest part. Sometimes you have parents who are like, just in complete denial, like my child does not have a diagnostic, profile or does not have a diagnosis. And so you have a situation there where it's like, okay, are they doing therapy? Are they not doing therapy? And then there's a lot of, confusion and miscommunication around those pieces of who's taking the child to which care centers. And it can get really messy if it's not really spelled out from the beginning.
Definitely, I can see how that happens. And it happens all the time, unfortunately, especially when you're so focused on court and litigating.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that, those details are left out, and people just, I understand. You want to get it done. You're tired of being in the middle in the pending, litigation sometimes. Or if you're resolving outside of court through the collaborative process or mediation, you still sometimes want to get it done. But it's so important, everyone out there, if you have someone with a child or children with special needs, to have someone like Jamie Bassos on your side, because you want to be proactive and you don't want to come back to the table, and you want to make sure that it's more holistic and that it's workable, something that it can be done. And you brought up something else that I was going to actually ask you. More often than not, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, I feel like some parents are hesitant, as you said, to, they don't want their child to be a statistic or to be labeled. What advice can you give to someone out there who is questioning that? They may have some concerns. They love their child, but they don't want to necessarily put him in therapy because, you know, they don't want their child to be labeled. They don't want their child to be looked at or bullied, whatever the concern is. Can you say something to the audience to address that?
Yeah, and that's a really big question, big conversation for sure. But I would say, if of course, you love your child. You want to do what's best for them. You want to support them, and having a diagnosis is your own and their own just personal information, and that information doesn't need to be shared with anyone, not even school, if you don't want to share that information. So having your child evaluated by the appropriate professional and getting the information that you need to make an educated decision on is step one, right? If you're concerned about something, get it looked at, figure out what's happening. Because if they are engaging in challenging behaviors, or they're not learning as fast as their peers, or they're not talking yet and they're 3, something is going on in the brain. And really having a clear picture of what that looks like is going to help you support them to the best of your ability so that they can live a full, independent life when they get older. So early intervention is key. The earlier that you can get into therapy, the better. And just making sure that you keep it as private and as secure as you want in terms of who you're sharing that information with. It doesn't have to be you're telling all your friends and family that, oh yeah, my child has a new diagnosis and now we're figuring out this therapy thing.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you from experience, it does take a village. It's nice to have the support of your family and friends and others who have similar situations to you and who also have children who might be neurodivergent. So I think, it's always good to surround yourself with similar people and that mindset. But that's a personal, decision for you to make those choices.
Absolutely. And just to share a bit personally, it's encouraging to have someone like you on the team. I can speak again with my daughter. She was born without oxygen. Fortunately enough, she's doing excellent today. AB honor roll, citizenship award,
Amazing.
very social. But I would also like to commend and applaud people such as you, because we went through the physical therapy, the occupational therapy, the IEP or
Mm-hmm.
504 in her, with her, and setting it up in the school that she's getting the accommodations that she needs. And if it's a school that is not giving the accommodations that they deserve, that's a conversation to have, which I have had to have and change schools because of that, because I think the school is something that, uh, if they're not supporting what the special need is, that's a conversation. So, but can you address that a little bit when it comes to the school and any tip that you would provide a parent to ensure that the school is supporting their child who has special needs.
Absolutely. And that first step, you don't have to have a formal diagnosis to get supports in your school. So you can go through the school evaluation. They can do their own independent assessment to identify where, they would fall in terms of accommodation. So whether it's a 504 or an IEP, they would decide through the school system itself. Or you can bring in your own outside evaluation and have that support, your decision to ask for those accommodations. But you want to make sure that that happens as soon as they enter, that public school system, and making sure they're in the right classroom, they have the right goals set up for them. Having those 6-month and annual meetings with the team is going to be really important, and making sure that the IEP is appropriate for your child. I've worked across many states in this country, over 19 different locations. And the IEP process is a little bit different in each one of them. But you do want to make sure that it's not just copy paste from somebody else's IEP, which I've seen many times, unfortunately. Someone else's kid's name is in my IEP and it's saying my kid uses an AAC device and he does not. So there's a lot of, stuff that can happen there that you want to just be in tune with. And your kid the best, like you are their best advocate. So showing up to those meetings and advocating for what they need. And it can be scary, right? You're like sitting in a room of the principal's there, the vice principal, you've got 4 maybe special education teachers, your SLP, your OT, and you as the parent, and you are the one representing your child most of the time. So going in and having a clear list of the things they need. And this is what I want to ask for. This is what they need based on what I know about my child. And so how are we going to work together as a team? It's got to be a team. It's a team-based approach, always working collaboratively to make sure that they're getting what they need in this environment. And of course, if you are, you want an outside opinion, bring in an advocate, bring in a board certified behavior analyst to come in and really make sure you're asking for what's appropriate.
Love it. And I think I'm big on energy, and children, they can feel that energy. And as much as you're advocating, they see that and they observe. And oftentimes it's contagious, right?
Yeah.
They begin to start advocating for themselves, which I think is phenomenal. So co-parenting strategies. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
What co-parenting strategies are most effective when raising a child with autism after separation? Because I know, when there's a separation and then the divorce, it's going to look different regardless. So can you explain to the audience what that looks like a little bit?
Yeah. So it's challenging, right? And communication is key. That is the first step in the right direction is proactive communication and consistent communication across both homes. This child who is, has special needs or autism or behavior disorder, they're going to be engaging in different behaviors in different homes. That's just naturally going to happen because the environment is going to be set up differently. Both parents are responding to behaviors differently. So you might see an increase in challenging behaviors in one home and then no challenging behaviors in the other. That does not mean that this parent is terrible and this parent is awesome. It just means that the environmental contingencies that are set up across those environments are different. And that's fine. That makes sense. That's where this behavior intervention plan comes into place and why that's so important to be part of that parenting plan from the get-go, because both parents could be attending parent support, parent training through their therapeutic supports, whatever therapy the child is involved in. Typically, there's a parent component and a caregiver training component where they're both receiving the same information on how to respond to these behaviors. So if they can get on the same page with, okay, this is what we're going to be doing when this behavior happens, we're all going to be responding the same way, they will see the same levels or 0 levels of challenging behavior. That's the goal anyway. And then communicating when things aren't working. So, I tried this intervention at my house. It didn't work. Here's what we did. Okay, let's talk about it. Why, when, what were the, consequences, and how is it different in this environment versus this environment? So really understanding that it's not it's not necessarily because the parent is a bad parent. And that comes up all the time. Like, oh, they're wonderful in my house, but at dad's house, he's throwing chairs across the living room, breaking TVs. It's not because dad's terrible, just dad maybe not following the behavior plan the way it's written, and mom is. And so having that open dialogue of, okay, dad, are you adhering to the behavior plan that was, laid out for you? And if you're not able to do it, let's talk through it. Why? What are the barriers? How do we get you, more on board with supporting this child in this way? Because we know this works, because we have data, which is another thing I love about my field, because everything is data based. So we have information to back up all of the claims and all of the findings that we have. So that communication piece is key. And then having a place where they can do that and feel good about it, right? Like, I know, like My Family Wizard and some of those other platforms where they don't have to verbally speak to each other if that's too hard, and sometimes it is, but they can type it out, they can take notes, they can have their data, so they're able to get all that information communicated across both homes.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That is very insightful. One last question. It's about you.
Oh.
If people had further questions, because you have so much information to share and valuable information, I must add, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, they want to consult with you, they have questions, and you can share with the audience where to find you?
Sure. So I have a website. It's just bassosconsulting.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Jamie Bassos. I'm on Instagram under Bassos Consulting. And I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes.
I appreciate this.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be here. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, thank you. So you've seen another episode of Civility Wins, the Family Law Edition. Again, I'm Kristen Goss, founder and owner of KWG Family Legal and Mediation Services. We are your knowledgeable, warm, and gracious attorneys. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And you don't want to miss the next episode with Mary Owens. She has a master's of social work, and we will be discussing further about divorce and the transition and how to set yourself up for success. So you definitely don't want to miss. Talk to you again. Take care.